What's going on, all of you beautiful people? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about one of the sexiest cameras ever made by one of my favorite camera companies, the Mamiya 7. Now, this camera hardly ever needs an introduction because of the prevalence it has on the YouTube platform amongst the film photography community. It is a rangefinder camera. I'm introducing it right now. I vividly remember about a year and a half ago now that my buddy Nathan, who got me into film photography, introduced me to this camera when we were walking through a camera store, and he said, like, that camera is worth so much money. And I looked at it and I was like, I don't get it. So a year and a half ago, I was like, I'm never gonna get that camera, total waste of money, all this other stuff of like trying to seem all tough and rebellious to how beautiful the camera actually was. It's kind of like that it girl that you're like, man, she's all right. And then later down the road in the movie that we've all seen before, the guy's like, oh yeah, she is pretty beautiful. And then whole plots of getting to that camera or to that person is what drives the story, is what keeps the audience in. That Mamiya 7 is that it girl from a year and a half ago. So I've had this camera for a little bit over a month now. I've taken it to a good amount of locations to test its portability and also its functions. Took it to Seattle, took it to Yosemite, of course, because I take all my new cameras to Yosemite. That's like the training grounds for all of my equipment. I took it to the Sunset District of San Francisco and also Japantown for a little street walk around. And I have to say that I have to give this camera a straight up 9.5 out of 10, which is a super great high score. And I will explain why that 0.5 is missing for those of you who always want a 100% score. But yeah, starting off with the first impressions, I remember reading up on a lot about this camera, and one of the more defining characteristics of its body is that it's plastic. I've dealt with like a lot of metal cameras like the Hasselblad and the Mamiya, and also like all my mirrorless cameras are made from a magnesium alloy body. So when I heard a plastic body, I was like, okay, that makes sense, that is like very light, why it's so travel friendly. But when I got it, I'm like, this is a super hefty camera. Like, yes, it definitely is plastic, but the grip is mega solid. The weight to it is actually a lot more substantial than what I thought it would be, given its like plastic description online. So I'm very glad that the build quality is a lot better than I thought. The grip is the most ergonomic thing ever. If I were to compare this camera to anything, it would be the Fuji GW690 or the 670. It is a rangefinder style camera straight out from Fujifilm, and it loads the same way. It has a rangefinder patch. The Fuji doesn't have a light meter in it. This one does, so this is super handy. Both camera systems are great. The lenses are sharp on the Mamiya, the lenses are sharp on the Fuji. You can't take the lens off of the Fuji, but most of the times, like, that lens will serve you well. But I would have to say that the characteristic that differentiates the two of them is this grip. I mean, this is such a deep grip, and everybody loves to like have a secure, tight hold on the camera. For the Fuji GW series, you're straight up gripping a flat out brick, and gripping a brick is not as comfortable as gripping a grip. What? And of course, the images that I got from the first few rolls that I pushed through this camera are immaculate. They are super sharp. It has not disappointed me. Mamiya glass is one of the best in the game, and my experience with the RZ has attested to that time and time again, and the Mamiya 7 holds up to that reputation. The next thing that I want to talk about is the function of this camera. It is a highly functional piece of equipment. My favorite part about it is the amazing light meter. If you've ever used a film camera with a built-in light meter, I feel like the more common one that you would see is when you're looking through it and you have pressed the shutter with your settings, maybe at like what, 1/1000 of a second, and your aperture at f1.4. It'll give you like arrows to show you like if you're overexposed or underexposed, and when you're correctly exposed, it could either show you a dot or both arrows lit up at the same time. And that's like a great option for light meter. It's good enough for like simple adjustments of turning the aperture blades or turning the shutter speed dial. But for the Mamiya 7 and some other cameras like the Voigtlander R2A and the R3A, R4A series, These light meters, they don't give you the arrows, they read out the entire scene that you are putting in front of your camera, and it'll just tell you what shutter speed you should go to. Like, it'll skip all the way to saying, hey, like, I'm gonna flash 500, you should just go to 500, instead of just giving you an arrow to tell you to keep going, like keep turning your settings until it's right. So these light meters are super advanced. They're super convenient, especially when you're trying to capture a quick scene, maybe in Japantown or the Sunset District of SF, and you're just wanting to jump straight to the settings so that you don't have to keep rolling and rolling and rolling until you find out oh shoot, I have to change my aperture as well. For the second version of this camera, Mamiya actually put in a polarizer for the rangefinder patch to prevent flaring for when you're focusing in a very bright scenario. I did find myself in some scenarios where the sun is hitting my camera at the right angle, where the focus patch where I'm lining up the ghost image with the real image, it kind of disappears and it gets washed out. It's not too much of a problem. I just have to adjust and then refocus. I don't think I lost a shot that I wanted because, I don't know, I lost time from adjusting with the flare, but that's just something that you should be aware of. Some Mamiya 7 ones are actually modified with that polarizer, so if you go on eBay, you could tell by looking at the front of the camera and this part right here. So mine is gray over here, but if yours is all rainbowy, that means it has that polarizer modification, and you'd be pretty much owning a Mamiya 7 II, because that's one of the only differences with the first version and second version. You know, the second version has the extra lug, it has the polarizer, and also has some upgraded plastics and a multi-exposure tab right here. I can't do multiple exposures on this, or maybe I can with some kind of mod, but it's okay. The one is very nice. And another cool feature about this camera for some is that, I hope you can see this, is that on the shutter speed dial, you actually have an aperture priority mode, so that you don't even have to worry about the shutter speed. You just fiddle with the aperture, and then the camera will decide what appropriate shutter speed will go with that. It's a very quick and simple way to shoot if you are trying to burn through rolls or capture a very crowded, candid, fast-paced scene. That feature is there for you. For me personally, I like to shoot in full manual because I just like having control over the situation. I'm typically used to using these external light meters, but of course, with the internal one, we are good to go. And yeah, I just like having the full process in the palm of my hands. And the last thing, of course, is to share my personal experience taking this on 4 different trips and pushing some great rolls and having great images lined up. And oh my gosh, my hair is spilling out of my hood like a fondue mess. This camera is definitely living up to the glory that everybody has hyped it up to be, and hopefully this video doesn't drive up the prices too much, because that always happens with every film camera review out there. But it's great. The lens is sharp. I have the 80mm standard f4 lens, and it has not disappointed me. I didn't want to go with the 65mm one, the wide one, because I already have that on the RZ, so even though that's my favorite focal length, I wanted something a little bit different. The portability is fantastic. I took it through an airport, and it was just super light in my pack. I almost didn't know that it was in my bag sometimes because I'm just used to carrying around the RZ, and I'm like, yeah, I definitely know that's on my back right now. Another thing that I own is also the Mamiya 7 panoramic kit. This is going to be a separate video on itself, but you can actually shoot 35mm film in the Mamiya 7, and it's actually an OEM part. It was intended for some kind of secondary use out of this camera to shoot panoramics, and it's super sick. It's kind of like the X-Pan, except the X-Pan gave you 20 shots. This will only give you 16, which means that the negatives are much wider, so it's super cool. I think that's what it means. So going back to my score, why it's 9.5 out of 10 instead of 10 out of 10. Seriously, everything about this camera is super perfect. But one thing that I kind of thought was going to be super easy was that when I load up my camera, usually for my 35mm cameras, once I put in the roll right here and I pull it over, I can just slip the lead into the slot on this take-up spool, and then I can just start winding without holding it down, without you know, kind of guiding it, kind of babying it until it catches all the way. I thought it would be like that because the Fuji GW was like that. I would just take the tip of the 120 film roll, put it in ever so casually, and then start winding casually, and it would just swallow it up. Before this camera, I really had to baby the film leader in, and then as I slowly tightened the film in, then it caught, and then it was good to go. Such a nitpicky thing, but it was very convenient when I could just do that with the Fuji GW, and the Bessa R2A from Voigtlander. I was just like, whoop, pull it over, slap it in, then start whining, and we were good to go. Like, that was awesome. But thank you guys for watching this video. This camera doesn't really need a review because there's tons of them out there. I just really wanted to share my thoughts, share some of my unique personal experiences with it, even though, you know, you'll find it elsewhere. And I'm just so happy owning the Mamiya 7 now. It has the same negative capability as my RZ67, which is huge because the form factors are so different. So we will be pushing out more videos with this as I like do some landscape work, also do some panoramic work with it too. I'm very excited to show you guys some of my work that I've been producing through that. And it's just going to be a very exciting time. I'm very blessed to even have this camera and, you know, have fun with it too. So make sure you like this video, comment down below, subscribe, and I will see you guys and girls in the next video. Oh, peace.